Hi, I'm Melissa Thorpe. I'm from Spaceport Cornwall. Who's heard of the Spaceport up at Cornwall Airport, Newquay? Has anybody heard about the Spaceport? Okay, a few hands. Okay, good stuff. So I'm here to talk to you about what's going on at Cornwall Airport, Newquay, and how we're working in partnership with the guys down here at Goonhilly and our partners Virgin Orbit. And then I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about what that means for Cornwall and what that means especially for you guys and potential job careers in the future. And then a little bit about how I got here, because it's a bit of a random story, because obviously I don't sound Cornish, do I? So I'm just going to go through a bit about the word disruption and disruptive. Obviously that can have a bit of a negative connotation to some people, but I think in the industry and what we're trying to do down here in Cornwall, it's a good thing. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. I'm going to start with a bit of a nod to the history of Cornwall. We have an incredible history down here in pioneering technology and pioneering people. We have Trevithick with the steam engine, and then also somebody named John Couch Adams who was a Cornish mathematician, and he actually discovered Neptune. So just a bit of a nod to the heritage that is down here, and the place that you're sitting right now, Goonhilly Earth Station, I'm sure we'll hear a bit more about later. But with Apollo, the Apollo program, and the legacy from here for that. So these people in these places have disrupted technology and have made massive impacts on the global marketplaces. And what we see ourselves doing with a launch facility down here in Cornwall is quite similar. So it's building on that heritage of the pioneering history of Cornwall and taking it to the next phase. So space also has a disruptive technology. You think of the Apollo 50th, which is coming up next Saturday, the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing. And you think of these massive space programs that did something incredible and inspired generations of school children. And from the Apollo program to the shuttle program, these massive government programs. And what's happening with space is we're looking at a shift away from government-led infrastructure and government-led programs into commercialization. But again, it's that nod to the past, that nod to the space heritage and technology that was. This graph here is showing that those historical programs, the uptake of STEM careers, along the same trajectory. So using those amazing programs and saying, how do they inspire the next generation, especially to get into STEM careers? And that's what we really want to focus on down here in Cornwall, is capturing that mood. The Apollo programs, they didn't actually have a specific outreach program. They didn't even think it was really going to have a major effect on inspiration, but it did. And that's without an official outreach program. So what we're now looking at down here is how do we create that sensation, that inspiration and excitement, and then build it into an official program that we can really engage with the schools in Cornwall. I'll come back to that in a minute. So I was talking about how space was a government-led, very state-led institution. What's happened is these entrepreneurs, so you have the Jeff Bezos, the Elon Musk, and the Richard Bransons, who were all three completely inspired to get into space careers by the Apollo program, without question. But they're not government officials. They are private individuals, entrepreneurs, and they are looking to commercialize space. So that's where the shift is at the minute, is you're moving away from state-led programs into private commercial programs, and they're commercializing space, and we call this the new space industry. So how do you create new business out of space technology or launch to space, and how do you get that out to the wider general population? So how does the UK and Cornwall fit into this movement of new space, into commercialization? I don't know if you realize, but the UK actually build a majority of the world's small satellites. And at the minute, we have to ship all of them overseas to launch, because we don't have a launch facility here in the UK. Not only does that cost a lot of money to transport, but what's happening is, these small satellite companies might be booking onto large, heavy lift rocket launches like a SpaceX launch, and they get bumped by government or more high profile satellite launches. So for a small satellite company in the UK, that's really hard to build into your business plan, that transport, but then potentially not knowing when you actually might launch your technology to space. So the UK government about 5 years ago said, right, we need a space launch capability in the UK. And they picked several sites around the UK, and one of them being down here in Cornwall. Now, there's two different kinds of launch. I think most of you in those pictures earlier with the Apollo and shuttle program, you think vertical launch, and that's the traditional way you think of launching to space. So the UK government selected a few sites, vertical launch sites, the traditional kind of look of launch up in northern Scotland, but they picked us down here as a horizontal launch site, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But again, that's disrupting the industry. Horizontal launch is completely different technology than looking at vertical launch, and it's making it more affordable for companies to launch to space. So why Cornwall? These two assets. Cornwall Airport Newquay, existing, operational civilian airport. It's one of the fastest growing regional airports in the UK. They picked us initially because we have one of the longest runways in the UK. We have direct access over the sea, low residential build-up, and quite clear airspace above us. So those were kind of the main criteria for it initially. But then, in addition, it's again where you're sitting right now. So it's that added benefit of having a tracking, monitoring, mission control site, just down the road. So it's kind of this lovely overall package that we have here in Cornwall for potentially operating a spacecraft from. So we were approached by the UK Space Agency 5 years ago and asked to basically join up with a potential operator and come back to them and ask for some money and a license. So we were actually approached by the Virgin Group. So Richard Branson has two space companies. He has Virgin Galactic, which is human spaceflight, and Virgin Orbit, which is small satellite launch. And initially we worked with both of them, but it looked like more realistically going forward that Virgin Orbit was kind of the first step we were going to take, so small satellite launch. So that's what we announced a few weeks ago, was our partnership with Virgin Orbit and also our UK Space Agency grant funding and license for launching small satellites from Cornwall. So we have the assets, we have the infrastructure down here in Cornwall to operate that. This is the Virgin Orbit system. If I can show you a video in a minute, they just did their first drop test yesterday. So what the Virgin Orbit system is it's a modified Boeing 747 with a about 70-foot rocket, Launcher 1, attached under one of its wings. So they took an ex-commercial airliner and they modified it. I call it upcycling, really. So we're reusing the existing airport in Cornwall, and we're basically reusing an aircraft to launch to space. And that again is completely different technology. It's pretty much unheard of in the industry to use two existing things, modify them, and get a space launch out of it. So what you see, the aircraft is called Cosmic Girl, and the rocket itself is called Launcher 1. So they are based out of Long Beach in California, and yesterday they just did their first drop test, which meant they dropped the rocket from the wing to just see how the balance worked, and ensure that once they drop that rocket, it doesn't fly around like crazy. They've gutted the entire inside of the airplane. It only has a crew of about 4 to 6 people with a pilot. So what that looks like, and I'll try and get a video up for you, but it will take off at the end of the runway like a normal aircraft would. It will go out about 300, 500 miles off the coast, up 35,000 feet, and then it will deploy its rocket from there. The rocket will then go into lower Earth orbit and deploy the satellites. The Cosmic Girl system, the aircraft, will then return to the airport and can do it again. So the carrier system, as it's called, is reusable, completely reusable. The rocket at the minute is disposable, but they're looking at reuse of that rocket. And reuse is a big thing going on in the launch industry. Elon Musk is probably the leader in that at the minute, looking at re-landing of rockets with SpaceX, but it's a really hard thing to do. So half the Virgin Orbit system is reusable at the minute. So that's incredibly exciting. The beauty of it is we don't really have to do much to the airport to be able to operate this, because it really is at the end of the day an aircraft. So the cost of getting the airport up to scratch to do this is in space terms is not very much. We announced 20 million of funding about 4 weeks ago, and that's a combination of Virgin money, UK Space Agency, Cornwall Council, and Goonhilly Earth Station are putting in some money as well. So that 20 million package might sound like a lot to you guys, but actually in the space realm of things, it's nothing. Spaceport America, purpose-built site in the US, costs hundreds of millions to do that. So all we really need to do infrastructure-wise to operate this is some lighting, some taxiway strengthening, fuel handling, and that's about it. So a lot of that money is into getting the technology from the States over here to the UK. And we'll be able to launch to space from Cornwall, right up the road. So we think that's pretty incredible. What this will mean is that we will be the only place in the world globally, Cornwall will be the only place to integrate space launch with general aviation operations from the airport. So you could be landing on your Flybe flight from Heathrow, and you look out your window and you'll see Cosmic Girl taxiing to launch to its rocket to space. So we think that's, first of all, amazing, but how inspirational for the young people of Cornwall to be able to come up to the airport and see this happening amongst, the search and rescue operations going on, the military operations going on, everything. So it's that full engagement piece, and that's how we see launch happening going forward. We see launch as integrating within existing infrastructure, so we're not having those heavy outlays of building these massive vertical launch infrastructure pads. So Cornwall will be leading the way again in a new technology. And going back to that first slide of the innovators that have come from down here, we just see this as that next step in innovation from Cornwall and being the world's first in disruptive technology. And who would have thought, when I started this, people laughed at me when we told them what we were doing down here in Cornwall. And we're looking at first launch in 2021. Like, that's not far away. So really exciting. That's what it'll look like. I don't think the video will work on here at the minute, but yeah, there you go. It's just showing it. That's the airport below, taking off the end of the runway and out to deploy its rockets. So why are we doing this in Cornwall? Why are we so passionate about this? A few reasons. Initially, we're going to look at, right off the bat, about 150 jobs in Cornwall, and that's just direct jobs related to the spaceport itself. That's not including all the ancillary jobs. We have many different companies already attracted to the airport just to get involved. Increases in tourism, people coming down to watch space launches, and all the supply chain jobs, including some of the jobs that will be down here at Goonhilly. And economic growth. So, we're providing some really highly skilled jobs here in Cornwall, and a fantastic brand in Virgin, and that acting as a catalyst for more investment into Cornwall. However, where the real value lies with space launch at the minute is satellite applications. So the whole reason we're really doing this is to get more satellite technology up into space. And you might think, why do you want more satellites in space? Well, it's the applications, it's what's inside those satellites that's changing life on Earth as we know it. So with things like tracking plastic in the seas, tracking poaching in Africa, there's a company on the Roseland that is monitoring refugee camps using satellite applications. We have Paddle Logger, who I'm sure, I don't think they're here today, but using weather monitoring and wave tracking in an application for people wanting to go paddleboarding and surfing. So everything we do, agriculture, driverless tractors are using satellite data to, monitor crops more efficiently. The applications of space are endless. So being able to provide a cheaper way of getting those technologies into space will allow more game-changing, life-changing technologies to get into space. So that is the reason that we want to do this, why Richard Branson wants to do this. He thinks that, Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. Richard Branson is more, there's no better place to be than Earth, so let's make it the best we can. So let's get these amazing technologies up into space cheaper so they can afford to do it. So we have a campaign. You'll probably see some imagery around the summer around Cornwall, just identifying some of the different sectors in Cornwall and how they'll benefit from satellites being launched from Cornwall. But my passion is that inspiration piece. So we're going out, we've been to 50 schools probably this year, talking about getting kids excited, because the little ones, I go to primary schools and I say, how many of you guys like space? Every single one of them put up their hands and are chatting about it, are so excited. And then you get to your guys' age, you might see a few hands go up. And where does that get lost? Where that shift from primary to secondary? How can we capture that excitement and move it into secondary so that you can maybe continue that into your careers going forward? Well, what about a physical example of space launch from your doorstep? I think, for you guys in the age you're at now, how amazing will that be for you to go up there and see this Virgin space launch happening from the airport that you all know and love. So for us, we're really going to be pushing a big outreach program through the schools in Cornwall in partnership with Goonhilly and Virgin, coming up over the next few years. So this is why we're doing it. We want you guys to be excited about this, but also to get interested in the STEM careers and the huge potential that is. I'll come back to that in a minute. Oh, my slide's gone. I'm missing a slide, but basically it's just to say some of those careers that we're looking at is it's not necessarily about being an astronaut anymore, to be in the space sector, or being an astrophysicist or anything like that technical. If you can, fantastic, because we're desperate for them as well. But the thing of beauty about this new space industry is it's crossing all sectors. So think about this when you're going through your the project that we're going to task you with today. It's end to end. So space advertising in space, mining in space. We're working with Camborne School of Mines looking at mining asteroids, agriculture in space. How do you grow food on the moon or Mars? Space Force, military, the militarization of space. What does that mean? Space law or in space insurance. So what happens if your satellite hits another satellite? Who's at fault? There's huge potential in this industry, and it crosses everything. Art in space. One of the first private individuals that's going to be going up with SpaceX is an artist from Japan. So think about space not only as its own distinct sector, but it crosses everything now. It crosses every sector, and there's so much potential. It's growing, and especially, my background's aerospace, which was, sorry to say, quite an old boys club. The aviation industry is very old boys club, and space is young. There's so many more women in it, and it's just vibrant, and it's just going for it. So I just kind of say to you guys, think about it beyond the normal space careers, that it kind of can cross everything. I'm from small town Canada. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. You think Cornwall's rural. I literally grew up in the middle of nowhere where there was no street lights. I didn't really have neighbors for another probably five or 6 kilometers away. I grew up in a small town in the interior of British Columbia. When I was going through school, I wanted to go into astronomy, and I was unfortunately told by a teacher that there was no career future in that, especially where I grew up. So I ended up going into economics and studied economics, but I really tended to continue to focus on aviation and space and technology, and looking at how places can grow their economies using these, existing assets that they have, a lot of old military sites, and how can they develop them. And then I moved to the UK to do my master's over here in London, and then I came down to Cornwall. So I'm a kind of a live example of, I do not have a space background, yet here I am. I get invited to speak on panels with people like NASA and the European Space Agency. So I am in the middle of this amazing, exciting career in space, but my training isn't space. And that, again, is the beauty of space. We need all these different backgrounds to come in to take this sector forward. And my job's incredible. I get to live down here, but I get to also travel the world and meet really exciting people. I get to go to the rocket factory in Long Beach and see this incredible R&D happening, and that's something they're going to be replicating over here, in the UK. And you guys are at the perfect age to get involved in this, because by the time you're coming out of university, the UK will really, really be booming in this, based on, having a launch facility here in Cornwall. So that's my plea to you guys, is think about space in the future a bit differently maybe than you have when I started this chat. If you have any questions, I'll be around while you guys are here today, and good luck with the project, and just think a bit outside the box for it, and good luck. Thanks.